Hello, San Francisco. Who here is enjoying config? We're enjoying it as well, and I have to say we feel immensely privileged to be up on stage today. Thank you so much for choosing to come and hear us today.
I will say also, just really quickly, because I was nervous, it's really good that I can't see the rest of you, because I can only see right here, and it's like my heartbeat is going down. So thank you for being here.
Little intro, I'm Emily Sneddon. I am an Australian designer, and I'm also the design director at Collins.
And I am Taamy Amaize. I am the Chief Strategy Officer here at Collins. And again, thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much for signing up for this talk, because without you being here, we would have nobody to talk to. So thank you.
So we are Collins. We are a transformation consultancy, and it is our mission as a company to design futures so irresistible they become inevitable. Now, the three most important words that we want to share with you today is design, irresistible, futures. Now, what does it mean to design an irresistible future? How do you design an irresistible future? And why are they important?
The thing is, design is fundamental to humanity, right? Humanity depends on design. And despite your role or your job description, don't let anyone tell you, we actually all are designers. I know I'm not classically trained, but the thing is, anytime you're putting out a new idea into the world, a new creation, a new solution, you are designing something. And the problem with most people is that when something new comes into the world, they can't readily understand what it is, right? New ideas are fragile, they're delicate, and most people are reticent to understand something that seems so new that it's foreign to them. So we as designers have a responsibility. It's not enough for us to introduce something that is new, right? Something that is innovative or context-breaking or arresting. To get that idea to take hold in people's mind, to take root, to be adopted and clamored for, we have to make it familiar. It needs to be iconic. It needs to fit an existing context in people's minds. It has to be recognizable. When you put these two things together, that's when you achieve irresistible future. That's when you create desirability for an idea, and that's when an idea can be adopted by the masses. So this is not a theory or an ethos that's specific to Collins. We've just observed human behavior and understand how to get ideas into the world. But about 40 years ago, the same thing happened with a hometown hero in Silicon Valley, Steve Jobs. He had a vision, which was to introduce the idea of personal computing into the homes of everyday Americans, right? To have them think about personal computing not as something that exists on a huge mainframe, on a whole floor of a big enterprise, but something that could be of value to people in their everyday lives. The problem with this is that at the time, personal computing felt like an exotic technology. It felt over here. So how could he get people to make that shift in their minds? One day, he was strolling through the kitchen appliance aisle of Macy's, and he saw this, the Cuisinart. He was so struck by its design, its friendliness, its materiality, that he brought it back to Apple, to the engineers and the designers, to study it, to say, how can we mimic and mirror some of the traits of this everyday appliance and bring it to our technology? And again, it wasn't just about the design. It wasn't just about the materiality and the size and the scale. It was about helping people make the mind shift and not think about personal computing as an exotic technology, but as an everyday home appliance, as friendly as a blender or a toaster or a dishwasher, so that this too could sit on the desktops and in the offices of everyday Americans.
So this is our office, one of them. We have an office here in San Francisco and also in Brooklyn, New York. This is the one in Brooklyn. And our offices are actually inspired by a quote by Mark Twain. Supposedly he said, "History doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes." And the reason why we're inspired by that quote is because when we start working with our clients, we look to the past, we look to history to find different challenges that people have faced before to see how they've overcome them. And what better way to find those stories in history than within books? In our library, we have over 5,500 volumes. And yes, there's plenty of design books, but there's also poetry, philosophy, science, technology, history. All kinds of genres allow us to dip into the past and find these similar challenges to see how they can take our projects in new directions and surprising ways.
And what Emily just said in terms of that quote that's inspired our offices, right? History doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes. That's a quote that inspires every project, every engagement that we work on. Because it's not enough for us on behalf of our clients to look at the brief and try to answer the brief head on. What we need to do is we need to answer a couple questions. First, what must our design truly do, right? What are we actually trying to achieve? And equally as important, what should our design enable on behalf of our clients, on behalf of the communities that they serve, on behalf of the world? So to answer those questions, we take a three-pronged approach. The first is this: we reveal a new perception. So on behalf of our clients, we help them find a new way of perceiving themselves beyond just what they make and what they do, right? That's why it's so important for us to be open to new inspiration. Equally as important, once we've found that new perception, we have to ground it in something familiar, right? The new and the familiar. So we have to find a parallel context. That's why those 5,500 books are so important, because we have to look to history, to poetry, to philosophy, to see where a similar problem has been solved in a different way. Once we find that, we find the actions and the behaviors of that parallel context, and we bring that to this new perception, this new context, right? So that there's a new visuality, a new tonality, a new way of speaking and behaving. This is the way where we disrupt the paradigm so that people are arrested by something that is new and unignorable, yet they have a familiar ground, a familiar context to see it in, so that they are more easily ready to adopt it, right? To evangelize it. So let's put this in practice, right? Again, not about theory, but how does this actually work? So we want to share a few cases that we've worked on Collins that might demonstrate this. The first is Next Insurance. Who here has heard of or interacted with Next Insurance? And again, there are so many lights that even if you guys all raise your hands, I wouldn't even be able to see, so thank God for that. Well, Next Insurance is an insurer that works with small business owners and entrepreneurs. And in 2019, cusp 2019-2020, we started working with them. We all know what happened in 2020, the pandemic, which was a particularly rough time for small business owners and entrepreneurs financially. We were on the verge of an unprecedented economic downturn, what likes we hadn't seen for the previous decade. And Next Insurance really had to look for ways to position themselves differently from their competition so that they could achieve growth and attract new audiences. So at Collins, as we do, of course, we do our due diligence and look at the category. And the category looked like this, right? It was dominated by doomsday messaging. How are you going to avoid risk? How are you going to survive if your business floods, or if you're susceptible to theft, or if it burns down? Everything around getting away from risk. The thing that actually we learned through our research that small business owners and entrepreneurs don't feel like concerning themselves with, right? These are people who have unearthed a passion to bootstrap their dreams and make them a reality, right? They've raised money from their friends and family. They're thinking about where they can go. They don't want to think about all the bad things that could happen. So we realized that the shift and the new perception that we had to have Next recognize about itself as a company is that it's not a company about risk mitigation. There we go. It's actually a company that's helping small business owners optimize their future. Or, said a different way, it's not about helping their clients cover their asses. It's a company that helps celebrate bravery. And that totally changed the dynamic and the paradigm in which we were talking about them. And so we helped develop a platform that was radically different from the category, that was also incredibly helpful for us as designers to figure out a new direction to take them in. And that idea was to get going, right? How could Next Insurance be the little voice in your ear, on your shoulder, behind your back that's saying, get going, take your passion, make it a reality. Don't worry about what could happen, we've got that. You can focus on where your business can go. And so we were able to buck conventions, right? Not conform to where the category was going, and in fact, take them someplace different. But, as Emily said, we had to go to our library. How could we find inspiration from something that was sort of similar, but gave us a new direction to go into? And so we went back into American history, a time in the American history in which there was economic strife, economic and financial instability, and we grounded on a place or a time, 1928, in which a movie star emerged on the scene to give people hope at the brink of the Great Depression that represented plucky optimism and could give us a new tonality and inspiration for how Next Insurance could mimic that same dynamic. And I'll show you that movie star right now. That movie star was Mickey Mouse. Literally, in 1928, Disney conceived of and brought Mickey Mouse to the masses, and Steamboat Willie was a film that played in Nickelodeons all around the country, providing hope and optimism despite the economic instability that was occurring in the country. So we looked at that. We looked at the illustration style. We looked at the way everyday objects were anthropomorphized and imbued with energy and emotion. We looked at the way things were sketched, and we looked at the way things were initially, animated and they moved. And we took that inspiration and we said, how might we translate that into the next world, right? If this is about optimism and hope in the face of adversity, then how could we bring that into a next sort of visuality? And so we decided to actually illustrate some of the objects and anthropomorphize the objects that a lot of the clients of our small business owners at Next Insurance actually used. On top of that, we decided to actually illustrate a whole next universe, an actual main street made up of the clients and the objects that would represent everyone that Next Insurance was trying to attract. We changed the tonality and the verbiage of the brand so that instead of those doomsday messages, it was something like, congrats, you can finally be what you always wanted to be when you grew up. Get next, get going. Again, that voice in the ear, that voice behind you that's saying, you can do this. And then we took it one step further and decided to actually illustrate all the clients themselves, right? What would the clients at Next look like if we brought this illustration style to life? And then we thought, if we are really a brand that's about getting people going, if we really want to focus on how we empower the small business owner, then let's actually infuse them into our photography style. So we created a documentary-like photography style that used actual Next employees or Next clients as the models and used their own merchandise to promote on the Next website so that we really put our money where our mouths were. And finally, along with our amazing partners, we said, okay, so how do we actually bring this to life? How do we create something that communicates what we're trying to put out into the world? And we created this with our clients.
This here's the old way of doing business insurance. And frankly, it sucks. It's all paperwork, hold times, and overpaying for policies you don't need. That's why Next created a new kind of business insurance. The kind that combines custom coverage with a simple, painless sign-up. Get your business covered in a few clicks at nextinsurance.com, save a few bucks, and discover a world of insurance that simply doesn't suck.
So with that, we were able to help them transition from this, right? An insurance company that was kind of falling into a sea of sameness, and helping them realize that with this new context, with this new perception of themselves, with this new parallel context, we could help them transition into a totally different type of insurance company with a new visuality, a new tonality, new verbiage, new messaging, and new behaviors that radically differentiated them from the category, broke their business for about a month because they had so much demand, but also helped them see themselves in a totally new way. Oh, thank you. Ooh. And none of this could be possible without our amazing, risk-taking clients at Next, our incredible partners, and our amazing Collins team, wildly talented Alex, Allison, Barney, Casper, Ian, Julien, Jump, Christine, Mary, and Tom. And with that, I'll pass it to Emily.
All right, I'm going to take you through a bit more work, and just forewarning, this next client may or may not be familiar to you. Okay, next question. Who recognizes some of these? I recognize a few. A lot of them predate me, but I do know of them and I do recognize them. And that's because for the past 40 years, the creative software industry has existed exclusively for one person and one person only, the professional designer. And these software companies have largely remained inaccessible to non-designers. When we started working with the wonderful people at Figma in 2020, we realized very quickly that Figma didn't follow that formula. In fact, we learned that 65% of Figma users exist outside of the design function. That means more than half of the people on Figma don't classify themselves as the professional designer. We realized that Figma had been intuitively avoiding the classic software paradigm of build for a persona, or in this case, a designer, and instead favored a new domain, the value chain, or in this case, the design value chain. In simpler terms, instead of making software for a single creator, Figma amplifies collaborative creation. Now, within culture, we have a long history of idolizing individual genius. Einstein, Michelangelo, Shakespeare. And no doubt, I want to be clear, that all of these people have significantly contributed to art and culture and our history. But it's also contributed to this idea that this is what it looks like to make something great. That's a myth. It's the myth of the lone genius. Because when you look throughout history, everything has taken communities, people coming together to create great things, to create new ideas, to create change. In other words, creativity has always been multiplayer. That led us to our campaign platform. Nothing great is made alone. So, we have our new domain of collaborative creation. Now we need to ground it in the familiar. So we asked ourselves, again, looking back through history, what could arguably the world's most well-known work of art, the Mona Lisa, painted in 1503, have anything to do with Figma? Well, we know that it was painted by Da Vinci, our polymath painter. But it also involved a model, a Florentine noblewoman, Lisa del Giocondo. And then in 1530, it was originally purchased by a royal patron, Francois I. And then in the year 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte enters this story. He rescues this piece of art because it had been hidden away for many years during the French Revolution. But many people don't know this. For the first 400 years of the Mona Lisa's existence, it wasn't well known. It wasn't until in 1911 it was stolen from the Louvre. It took more than 28 hours for anyone to even notice that it was missing. Naturally, it hit the newspapers, and overnight it was famous. So you can see how all of these people have come together to create what we know and what we perceive as the Mona Lisa today. This idea of grounding it in a familiar story challenges the long romanticized ideas of individual achievement. It also leverages the visuality and the interface language of the Figma platform. And this platform allowed us to tell stories that went beyond centering the designers, stories about science. For instance, how the theory of relativity was developed by Einstein with the help of his friends and colleagues. You see, the reality is that without Emmy Noether making significant leaps in abstract algebra, or Michel Bessy, who trialed and errored the first calculations, or Marcel Grossman, who helped to with the precursor theory that eventually led to the theory of relativity. As you can see, without all of these people working on their craft, pushing things forward, coming together, the theory of relativity may not have happened. And we kept looking through history, and we kept uncovering these familiar stories that when you dig a little, you scratch beneath the surface. They go far deeper. Stories like how in 1816, a teen goth, Mary Shelley, created Frankenstein, a sci-fi horror novel, by workshopping her first draft with friends. Who was in that friend group? Lord Byron, of all people. Or how many people over the past 150 years have contributed to imagining and building Sagrada Familia in Barcelona in Spain. Genius ends in us for a reason. This is a little snippet of an ad that we ran with Figma for Stonehenge, and you can see how in motion we were able to personify the curses and ground these stories in the past through the human behaviors of people in the present. Nothing great is made alone gives Figma a platform that allows them to speak to all kinds of users across the end-to-end collaboration, because design is more than the professional designer. All of these people coming together create sparks of ideas, and we were able to visualize that through this metaphor. And then this led to some really exciting opportunities for us. We got the chance to imagine spatial design for the Figma offices, including this collaborative peg wall. And that led to posters and employee swag. So we made a campaign tagline, "Nothing great is made alone." And we debunked the myth of the lone genius by grounding it in stories that were familiar to all people across the design process. And of course, that led to applications on social, out of home, and even for their offices. And of course, none of this would have been possible without our friends at Figma, our partnership with Animade, and of course, the rest of the Collins crew. Alex, Angelica, Ben, Darius, Eric, Jump, Louis, Madeline, Megan, Michael, Sanook, Tammy, Tom, and Thomas.
And Emily.
Thank you.
Also, just side note, I'm like surprised that we're on time. I for sure thought we were going to go
my
over,
goodness.
but we're really almost done. So we know that this is all about taking something tangible away with you. What can you do with this, like right off the bat? Again, regardless of if you are a classically trained graphic designer, whatever type of designer you are, whatever your job is on behalf of yourself or your clients, you can do this right away. Reveal a new perception, seek parallel context, and help embody new actions. That's the way that we make irresistible design so irresistible that it becomes inevitable. And with that, thank you so much for having us. It's been a privilege and an honor. Thank you.